students and learning coaches, welcome back to Literature and Comprehension. We're going to continue to work in Unit 20. We're on Lesson 5. We're still looking at the story, The Little Red Hen. If you are doing Lesson 5 on a separate day than you did Lesson 4, then there are some activities you will want to complete before you move on in Lesson 5. Learning coaches, you will need your lesson guide. The Language Arts Lesson Guide, we will be on page 443. You can also use the lesson guide that's provided online, which is what I am using in this video. You will also need your K-12 Read Aloud Treasury book. The story, The Little Red Hen, is located in that book on pages 148 and 149. If this is a separate day that you are doing Lesson 5, you will want to go back and do a book walk through the story once again with your student. You will want to read the title of the story to your student. You want your student to look at the pictures in the story, especially the pictures on page 148. Have them look at the animals in the picture, the little red hen, the dog, the cat, the pig, and the turkey. You can ask your student what are some of the things that the little red hen asks the animals to help her do. Let them answer that question. Some answers that we're looking for is planting the wheat, cutting the wheat, taking the wheat to the mill, baking the bread, and eating the bread. These are some of the activities that the little red hen asked the animals to help her do in this story. Once you have looked at the pictures and talked about the title of the story, then you will want to go back and go over the new words that are in the story that you're going to be reading, such as the word grain, which is the seed of a cereal plant such as wheat or rice, ground, which means crushed, a mill, which is a place where wheat is turned into flour, and ripe, which means ready to be picked or cut down. So once you've completed those activities, rereading the story, doing a book walk, and going over the new words, then you can move on with the rest of the activities in this lesson. Today's lesson is going to talk about the characters in the story. Students, look at your learning coach and tell them what a character is. If you told your learning coaches that characters are the people or animals in a story, you are correct. Now, tell them what the most important character in a story is called. Do you remember what the most important character in a story is called? Tell your learning coach that. If you told them that the most important character in a story is called a main character, you are correct. For example, in the story Jack and the Beanstalk, the characters in that story are Jack, his mother, the giant, and the giant's wife. But students, who do you think in the story Jack and the Beanstalk, who do you think the main character is? Tell your learning coach who you think the main character is. If you said Jack, that is correct. And how do you know this? Tell your learning coach, how do you know Jack is the main character? Because most of the story is about Jack and what he does. Let's think about another story that you may be familiar with, Little Red Riding Hood. Who are some of the characters in this story? Tell your learning coach some of the characters in Little Red Riding Hood. If you said Little Red Riding Hood, her mother, the wolf, the grandmother, or the woodsman, those were all characters in the story Little Red Riding Hood. Who do you think the main character in that story was? Tell your learning coach. If you said Little Red Riding Hood, you are correct. And how do we know this? How do we know that Little Red Riding Hood is the main character? If you told your learning coach that most of the story is about Little Red Riding Hood and what she does, you are correct. Learning coaches, if Jack and the Beanstalk and Little Red Riding Hood are not stories that are familiar with your students, you may choose some other stories to discuss characters and main characters. Now, also today, as we discuss characters and main characters, we're going to be talking about how the characters are alike. We're going to compare the characters to find out how they're alike. And then we're going to also contrast the characters. which means we're going to find out how the characters are different. So let's look at our story, The Little Red Hen, and see if we can answer some questions about the characters. So I'm going to go down here in our learning guide to the questions that are already here for you, learning coaches, to ask your students. So we're going to start off with checking your understanding of what you read. So let's talk about The Little Red Hen. Who are the characters in this story that we read, The Little Red Hen? Tell your learning coach who the characters are in The Little Red Hen. Students, if you told your learning coaches that the characters in the story were the little red hen, the dog, the cat, the pig, the turkey, the little red hen's 4 little chicks, those were all characters in our story. Now, who is the main character in the story? Who is this story mostly about? Tell your learning coach. If you said the little red hen, you are correct. The main character in this story is the little red hen. What makes the little red hen the main character? Why do we know that she's the main character? Tell your learning coach the answer to that. If you told your learning coach that most of the story is about the little red hen because she does all the work, you are correct. So let's go ahead and move on to some other questions about our characters in the story. Once again, we're going to be comparing characters. We're going to see how they are alike, and we're going to be contrasting characters to see how they are different. Okay, sometimes characters act the same as each other, and sometimes they do the exact opposite of each other. So good readers look for these things so that they can better understand a story's character. So we're going to look at some questions. I want you to think about the answers and tell them to your learning coaches. How is the little red hen different from the other animals? Tell your learning coach, how do you think little red hen is different from the other animals? If you told your learning coach she is willing to do all the work to make the bread, so that makes her different than everybody else, because if you think about the rest of the animals, they didn't want to do any of the work. She is the only one that wanted to do the work. How are the dog, the cat, the pig, and the turkey alike? How are those animals alike? You told your learning coach none of them wanted to help with the work. That's how they were all alike. Now, how are the cat, the dog, the pig, and the turkey the same as Little Red Hen? We talked about how they were different than Little Red Hen, but how are they the same as Little Red Hen? If you told your learning coach they wanted to eat the bread just like Little Red Hen wanted to eat the bread, what words would you use to describe the Little Red Hen? What words can we use to describe Little Red Hen? Tell your learning coach how would we describe the Little Red Hen. If you said she was busy, she was a hard worker, those would be some really good words to describe the Little Red Hen. What words would we use to describe the dog, the cat, the pig, and the turkey? Think about the story and what they were doing or not doing in the story. Tell your learning coach. If you use words like they were lazy, they didn't want to help, they didn't like to do hard work, they were not helpful, all of those would be good answers or good words to describe the dog, the cat, the pig, and the turkey. How do you think the Little Red Hen feels doing all the work by herself? How do you think she feels? Tell your learning coach, how do you think the Little Red Hen felt about doing all the work by herself? She probably was not very happy. She probably felt very busy because she was having to do all the work by herself. Probably not happy with her friends. Okay, next question. How do you think the other animals feel when the Little Red Hen doesn't share the bread with them. Think about the story. Remember, she told them that they couldn't have any bread because they didn't help her. How do you think that made the other animals feel? If you told your learning coach, they probably felt bad because they didn't help and they realized that they didn't do the right thing, or they were unhappy because they didn't get any of the bread. All of those would be some really good answers. Do you think it was fair for the little red hen not to share the bread? Do you think it was fair that she didn't share the bread? Tell your learning coach, what do you think? The animals may have thought it was not fair, but I think it was, she did the right thing. They didn't work and help her out doing all the hard work. Then they should not get to share in having some of the bread. If you were a little red hen, what would you have done? Would you have shared the bread with the animals or not? You think about it, if you were a little red hen and you had asked your friends to help you do some work and they said they didn't want to do anything, but then when the bread was done they wanted to eat it, think about what you may have done. And learning coaches, your students may have different answers for these questions, so there's not really a right or wrong answer for this. And as you're going over these questions with your student, the answers are in pink. But for some of them, there's no right or wrong answer. Boys and girls, thank you so much for being with me today and listening to our lesson 5. And I will see you when we do lesson 6. Have a great day.